Hi everyone, welcome back for another David Hartman webinar. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Donna Chow and I'm your host and your moderator for today's eLotus webinar. Here at eLotus, we have been hosting educational courses for over 2 decades, and we are proud to be your trusted source for premium CEU content with over 200 speakers, 700 courses, and 3,000 hours of continuing education. Today's webinar is Numerology and Acupuncture Point Combinations, Club 27 and 5-Element Archetypes, presented by David Hartman. This is the third of a 4-course series on numerology and acupuncture point combinations. Register for the upcoming live webinar or purchase the video recordings later to reap the full benefits of the entire series. CEUs are available with both options. And even better, I recommend the Gold Pass membership, which gives you the free access to all of them, as well as unlimited CEUs and free herbs. I will provide you with the link to what thousands of your colleagues have already joined and learned from various masters, different protocols that have made their practice the dream practice that they have always wanted. Today's webinar will be from 9 to 6 p.m. Pacific time, and we will have 4 breaks with 1 lunch from 1 to 2 p.m. For lecture notes, you can download them directly from the Blue Course Access page in your eLotus account. And to use the webinar chat room, please do this right now and set your chat preference to everyone so that everyone can see what you're typing and be part of the conversation. To ask David a question, you can enter it in the Q&A box. And finally, the quiz and the video replay. You'll be notified by email tomorrow once they are available. Our speaker, David Hartman, is a licensed Chinese medicine practitioner who has been in practice in Brisbane, Australia since 1997. David is well known for his trademark acupuncture point combinations, for which he has also written a textbook. David has spoken at conferences and seminars all over the world, and here at eLotus, he has taught classes on 5 spirits, emotions, mental well-being, as well as the 5-element archetypes and 5 spirits acupuncture, all of which are now available for purchase as a distant learning CEU video through elotus.org. I'll post the link for you when I get back to my computer. David's presence here today is truly an honor and a privilege. And so without further ado, David, please go ahead and take over and share your PowerPoint.
Thank you, Donna. Thank you, eLotus. Yeah, it's a very exciting opportunity, as always, to get to present for eLotus. Even though it is 2 o'clock in the morning for me, I'm glad to be given the opportunity to be able to present something that's a real passion of mine. It's something that if you were at the first 2 parts of, you hopefully got a sense of that, but also that understanding that it's something that, especially in numerology, has been a process for me that's been around for probably since I was in my teenage years. I remember walking past Mum's shelves all the time and seeing the different books that she had there, and there were a few numerology books, and I didn't always pay attention to that, of course. I guess when you walk past something enough, can sometimes blur into the background, but it's I guess from there I did pull some of the books out and had a look at them and sort of grown from there. And then with acupuncture itself, I actually started studying it when I was only 19, which is pretty unusual, certainly in Australia. Usually it's the higher majority of students are more middle age. So as a result of that, you know, it was a bit unusual for me to be going through it at my age. But anyway, that, I guess, merging of early on numerology thinking and my starting acupuncture young. And it's taken me, basically, I'm now 48 years old. It's taken me, I guess, nearly 30 years to get to a point where I feel like putting the numerology and Chinese medicine together is something that can be done. And that's what's been exciting about this, is eLotus giving me the opportunity to present on this theme. The fact that it's never been written before by me resulted in, when I wrote the CPD application for eLotus, quite a few months ago now, the idea of how it was going to be structured, by the time I started writing this 2 days, it became very clear to me that if it stayed that way, you're going to get a double up of information if you were attending both days of this workshop. And so what I've done instead is altered it slightly, but not taken any content out, just it's in a slightly different order. And that was primarily, as I said, because otherwise you would have ended up with half of today and half of tomorrow having the same information twice. So instead what I've done is, as I said, altered it to make it flow better, and so that you weren't negatively impacted by attending both days, where you go, oh, David's giving me the same stuff again, like he did yesterday. So that is why the structure is slightly different to perhaps how you might have seen the CPD application. Okay, so let me get my share up. Oops. All right, so hopefully you should have my slide workshop 3 part 1 up. If you are here and you did not watch workshop 1 and workshop 2, it's not impossible for you to keep up. This would be a case of you, I guess, either having a good sense of what numerology is, or certainly going back and taking the opportunity to watch workshop 1 and 2, maybe at the end of today, start to fast track some of it. But we'll do a quick revision, just fire through a quick 1 hour review of each of the key features so that people are on top of it. Okay. Well, it seems to me that the best relationships, the ones that last, are frequently the ones that are rooted in friendship. One day you look at the person and you see something more than you did the night before, like a switch has been flicked somewhere. And the person who was just a friend is suddenly the only person you can ever imagine yourself with. I liked this quote because I feel like what we've got is some really good connections happening through the various numerology system itself. So through relationships or connections of the ruling numbers with the personal year numbers, with the arrows. But now what we're going to look at across the 2 days is the connections between numerology and also the Chinese medicine themes of the 5 element archetypes and the 5 spirits as well. So we're going to look at those connections. Also, through the next break, I might see if I can get a light set up so it's a little bit better on my face. I have a screen behind me as a second screen, and I had it on, and it was shining light on my face, so I got a false sense of the right light on me, and now that I'm looking at myself, I'm like, oh no. So I'll look at fixing that up in the first break for you. What we're going to do is a little Aussie quiz to get us started in the day. So in the chat room, I want you to be answering them just one at a time as we go through. So do you know what we say in Australia when we say, "G'day, mate"? What are we referring to? If you could put that in the chat. Hello? It's hello, right? Yes. Very good. Good day. Very good. All right. I think that was probably an easy one. What about why we might say, "G'day, mate," to someone? We're saying hello to them, but there's another reason for why we might say mate to them. Because perhaps we've, I'll just see if you know. Yeah, you're saying it like they're a friend, kindness, to connect. Yep. It's also to do with the fact that maybe we've forgotten a crucial component. So we say, yes, thank you, Charity. We forgot their name. So if we say, "G'day, mate," it's a way of us still saying, hey, I recognize you, but I've forgotten your name. So I don't know if that's a bit cheeky. Um, I'm very good at that. If I've forgotten someone's name, I will actually acknowledge that. I'll go, g'day, mate. Look, I'm really sorry. Your name has just slipped my mind. But thank you. What is full as a goog? Any ideas? Drunk? Oh, that's a good one. No. Full? No idea. Full as an egg. You've eaten too much. Very good. Yep. I'm full as a goog. I'm stuffed. I've eaten too much at the buffet. Very good. What are we referring to when we call someone blue? Not sad. It's logical though, isn't it? Depressed or down? No. My friend is Australian. We might say, g'day, Blue. How are you, mate? Does that help? No? Male, they might be male, or they could be female. Not that they're cool. I mean, they might be cool. It's got to do with the color of their hair. G'day, Blue. How are you, mate? A redhead, yeah. So we call someone blue if they've got red hair. I have no idea why. What about if we call someone red? Blue hair. It's logical, isn't it? No. I guess you could. They're red too. So we call a redhead blue and we call a redhead red. Yes, I know. You're probably shaking your head going, what's the go with the Aussies? So yeah, we call someone blue when they've got red hair and we call someone red when they've got red hair. Go figure. Doesn't have to make sense. What's Wednesday? Yeah, now this is interesting because I didn't know if you'd know this one, but I was doing a course with the ACAOM in Houston online a couple of weeks ago, and they said that they do that down in Texas as well, that Wednesday is Wednesday. So Saturday logically is Saturday. Very good. So that must be not just an Aussie thing. Thank you. What's a missus? A woman, wife. Yeah. I think we did this one a month ago, but I said Sheila. Very good. What about what's Haru? A kangaroo. You could say Haru to a kangaroo. Yes, it's saying goodbye. Haru, mate. See you next time. I think last month we had catch on the flip side as see you later. And then I've got a weird sentence that you might have to break up into pieces, but it goes something along the lines of truth. Someone nicked the esky out the back of me ute last Sunday and me healer did jack. What am I saying there? This isn't English. Yeah, I know. So what's truth then? Isn't Jack kangaroo? There is a kangaroo movie with called Jack. Something happened on Sunday. Someone stole something from the back of your car and your dog did nothing. Okay, there we go. Truth. So crikey, goodness me, someone stole the esky out the back of my esky's a cooler. Yeah, like a chili bin cooler. I'm not sure what you call it. Out the back of my, I guess, truck last Sunday, and my healer. So my Australian cattle dog, blue heeler, red heeler, did jack, as in did bugger all. So yeah, that's what it means. chili bin, I know. New Zealanders and Australians have their own unique style of language, which isn't necessarily even the same as each other, and certainly not the same as other places in the world. So thank you very much for amusing me with the little Aussie quiz. We do another Aussie quiz tomorrow morning as well. All right. The serious stuff now, perhaps? Okay, so today, let's look at what we're going to do. So the first bit is an extension on adding layers to this whole idea of acupuncture point combinations, continuing a theme I did a month ago about common questions people ask me about all the treatments, because the reality is across the next 2 days, you get dozens and dozens of treatments or acupuncture point combinations. And so I've found in the past, if you don't get some sort of a platform, even though I explain the point combinations quite well, you get a lot of questions that pop up. And if any of you have attended my workshops before, they tend to be fairly full. And so there isn't always a lot of time to ask questions. So this is kind of a bit of a preemptive strike on that. That's the first little bit, leading into a short break. Then we will quickly review the ruling life path numbers. What I hope is that you will, over this next couple of hours, have not just your ruling life path number worked out on a sheet of paper, but perhaps even a dozen or so, half a dozen or so other people as well. What I mentioned a month ago was that if you had, say, a person's name at the top of a page, and then you worked out their ruling number, their personal year numbers, their arrows, if they have any, and then as we go through tomorrow and adding in the archetype systems and the 5 spirits, you start to build an image of that person, so that it's almost like at the end of the 2 days, you've got a much more rounded sense of who these people are, whether they're friends, family members, patients that that you want to understand more about, build this bigger image. And so that then, as we're whipping through that quicker hour here, this part 2, you're getting more than just your number sort of discussed as well. Then part 3 will be quickly whipping through, as said, the personal year numbers as well. And then you look for connections. Have you got any, like if you got the same numbers twice? So if you're attending this workshop and you're 18 years old, or you're 27, 36, 45, 54, 63, 72, then your numbers, your personal year number and your ruling number are actually colliding, which tends to mean either good or bad. And we'll talk about that in part 4, which will be just after lunch, I would imagine. And we look at what happens when it's a good collision, a bad collision, and variations between an okay bad collision and a really bad one. And then look at this connection of how the collision impacts our outside world and our inside world. And that's that kind of self-esteem where you've got this sense of what's happening outside, and then also this internal world, which is connected to what I call your inner critic, but also your heart shines. It's that yin-yang balance. So we quickly touch on that, but we spend more time on that again tomorrow, where we round out tomorrow and the whole weekend and even the whole of the 4 parts of this workshop with a better sense of how numerology, the 5 element archetypes and the 5 spirits play in with our self-esteem. So we look at the outside world, inside world, and both worlds in more detail again tomorrow. We look at other number collisions, and then we look at the treatments. So we had to give you a quick review of the ruling numbers and the personal year numbers so that when we get to the collisions, the point combinations aren't completely overwhelming. And then again, you can look at those as being upcoming things for you. Maybe you're not 18, 27, 36, 45 years of age, but maybe you're about to be one of those years. So it's you're preparing yourself for that collision of numbers so that you get a positive outcome from it. And then the last two parts of the day are looking at the 27 club, the 28 set. So these are the people that died when they were 27 years old or 28 years old. We look at some of the members, look at what it means, because in the end, like any age, you're going to get people dying no matter what age you are. And in fact, we've just recently had, over the last week, 3 famous people die. Some of them were more famous in Australia, but like Anne Hesh, for example. But I mean, you know, she's not within any of these age brackets that would dictate a particular reason for why she died. So people always argue, well, because there's this thing called 27 Club, wouldn't there also be just as many famous people that died when they were 26, 28, 56, you know, all these ages? And that's not unfair. It's about looking at the numerology connections and where the biggest risks can play out, but where the biggest rewards can also be had as well. And then the last part is looking again at the 28 set in more detail. They only introduced in that previous part. We look at who some of those people are. We also look at how important that first year of your life is, which is a bit of a sad kind of discussion, so we don't spend a lot of time on it, more just outlining that process. What 54 years of age looks like, 81 years. We look at numerology and the year 1752 because of an issue with the changing of calendars for some countries and how that can impact on if we want to look at ancestors or historical figures and work out their numerology, but we go before 1752, what that can mean for us. Obviously, there's a few little notes that we always include. So APC means acupuncture point combinations, and we're going to look at that across this next little bit about what that really means. I've written the births out, date of births out, because they're different depending on what country you live in. So I know that in America, or I believe that in America, you actually would write July 27, 1986, and then you would write it as 7/27, 1986. In Australia, we would actually write it as 27/7, 1986. It's one of those annoying things where it'd be nice if everywhere on the planet all had the same structure for things. I doubt that's ever going to happen. So what I try to do is make sure that you understand the abbreviation depending on where you live. Okay. So I don't believe there is just one answer to things. And what I hope is that this workshop and any workshop I do actually stretches your thinking about how to construct treatments. I think that to some degree, people that consistently attend my workshops are doing it partly because the treatment structure makes sense to you. I hope it's partly because I'm engaging and I give good information. And maybe some of the treatments are very different to the way that you do something. But what I'm kind of hoping is that there is that kind of consistency, that you're seeing some stuff that makes sense to you, but that hopefully you're looking at it in your own brain and you're going, oh, I'm going to adjust that slightly for my experience and for my patients. And that's what I hope you do. The point combination that's on the slides is a great place to consider starting. It's like a framework, and then you edit the frame to suit your patient and to suit your style of acupuncture. Maybe you do unilateral needling, maybe you flip patients, you know, all these different things that might dictate how you construct or edit the treatment. So I always try to encourage people to come into workshops that I do with an open mind. I may challenge your views or be completely counter to them. I mean, I just had an email a couple of days ago from someone that said, they liked the way I'm thinking, but they look at things almost completely opposite to me. And so they're hoping that we'll start up a bit of a sprightly debate about Chinese medicine and the way that we think. And that could be quite an interesting email conversation because of the fact that we're looking at things different. But you know what? If we're both doing stuff that is helping our patients, then that is not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, there's regular contradictions in Chinese medicine as well. I mean, that's what I love about it. I don't know if I mentioned this a month ago, but I've been teaching Chinese medicine at colleges since 2000. And what I've found is in that sort of 22 years is that consistently students tend to pull out after that first year, if they're going to pull out at all. If they make it into the second year, they usually make it right through. There's always going to be some attrition rate throughout the whole course, but the largest percentage of people that seem to leave the acupuncture degree is in that first year or after the first year ends. And a lot of it, from my understanding, seems to be because of the fact that there's contradictions, the fact that they can't put things into boxes, that this means this, it can't mean that, certainly can't mean that. And you can't do that in every instance of Chinese medicine. And for people that like a structure and a process, maybe they're scientific, maybe they're mathematical. And when you come into Chinese medicine as a career, you start to learn it and you can't always box things into places. It might mean this, but sometimes it could mean this. And those contradictions and differences are what I really love about Chinese medicine, but it completely fries some people's brains. And I get it. Maybe Chinese medicine isn't for people that think in that style. I'm not really sure. So couple that with the Western archetype system of numerology, and there is likely to be some challenges as we navigate through this workshop together. Because again, what we're trying to do is merging East with West. So is that something that we can conceivably do? Now, I think it's very different to when I first went through, but I remember one of the first things that my teacher said to me in 1993 when I started studying is that don't ever try to put East and Western medicine together. Don't ever try to put the concepts of Eastern and Western healing together. And at the time I went, okay, whatever. I mean, I'm 19 years old at that stage and I didn't really know any different. But I think that there's actually a lot of value in actually doing that. And I don't know if the person that taught me back then may still have that view. I think that you can put the two concepts together. And I think that you can put Eastern and Western thinking together as well. And again, you can put them together and see if there's a connection. Maybe there's a slight connection and then there's all this stuff separate to that that's unique. But even if you put them together and they completely oppose one another, doesn't that still create some form of thinking, some form of exploration? For me, it's like going down that rabbit hole where you start looking at something and you end up dipping your toe in somewhere and you go, oh, that's really interesting. And you follow it through all the various tunnels to find something. So I think that there's some good connections, but I think that sometimes that can't work. But that's the whole point of this 4 days. The 2 a month ago and the two over the next 2 days is looking at actually connecting Eastern and Western concepts. So the goals of any workshop that I present And also if I'm an attendee, say someone else was talking today and I was in your shoes as a participant, I would want to learn something new. I would want to be reminded of something I'd forgotten. I love that idea that it's been there all that time, and then the presenter says something where it brings it back out and you go, oh, I remember that. That's really cool. And then often if it's brought back out into thinking again, it's often not forgotten again. Excuse me. And reaffirming your own knowledge base. Again, consolidating that knowledge, going, this is good, I know this, I'm being told that it's correct, is also a really good thing as well. So I hope that you get those three things across this workshop. So there are two vital process steps with which I have seen many students struggle. The first is transforming a list of signs and symptoms and clinical observations into a traditional Chinese medicine pattern differentiation. The second is constructing the most appropriate acupuncture point combination to address the specific health needs of the presenting patient. Now, I know I touched on this a month ago. I used this quote back then as well. The slides coming up are different questions, other than a couple which I felt were very important to include again. The idea there is very valid from Johnny Mack, in the sense that they're the two main areas that I also find, sorry, excuse me, got a frog in my throat now, where you as a student are trying to get a sense of a patient comes in, you get a bit overwhelmed. They've got so many different signs and symptoms. How are you possibly going to diagnose that? And then if you do diagnose it, what treatment am I constructing? Is it a prescription that's addressing the underlying disorders, or more the newer manifestations? Am I trying to do both? Is it all too overwhelming? There's so many different organs diseased, or too many elements that I'm trying to construct treatments of. So then it's about working out what acupuncture points you want to use so that there's good outcomes. You know, you don't want to necessarily do 1,000 needles that are all working on different things. You're trying to, I hope, target a few things to get the best possible outcome for your patient. I think you can spread yourself too thin if you do too many needles, and I think potentially you can perhaps not do enough if you're not quite doing enough needles. And I guess the thing is that how many needles are you using in your treatments as well? And that's what we're going to look at in terms of what I do, and then we'll get a few questions back at you as well. So I call the acupuncture point combinations that because it's about that structure. It's looking at the points I'm using and how they combine together. It's like the title, for me, gives a better sense of what I'm trying to achieve with my treatments. Point prescription, treatment, point formulas, that type of thing. I know we all have different names for them. And I guess it's, for me, that idea that Chinese herbal formulas are a formula of individual herbs that are working together as a team to get an outcome. And that's what the acupuncture points in my treatments are designed to do, working together as a team. And I know last time I asked this question, and I tend to ask it in all my workshops, back to you, what you call your grouping of needles. So if you could put in your chat whether you have a particular title that you call them, point prescription. Oh, someone's asked, does Jack mean okay? No, Jack means my healer did Jack. Jack did bugger all. Yeah, didn't do anything. Point prescription, point strategy. Okay. Point combo. I guess it probably comes down to what your lecturers might have told you. what they called it. Yep, AX. Some people do RX or TX. Yeah, and some people, yeah, but I guess it's, yeah, I haven't thought about it. That's true. It's kind of sometimes this thing. It's like the first question that people ask me is why you, like, how many needles you use in a treatment, and for a long time I never had really thought about it. Yeah, TX, yeah. And in terms of how you construct, I tend to mix strategies. Yeah, how do you construct your APC or point prescription? Like, how do you get to the point where you're choosing your points? And as I said, I'll talk about what my strategy is in a minute. So what are you doing? How do you go off Zhang Fu patterns, balance method, 5-element theory? My understanding of American colleges, you tend to be a bit of a mix. You're either sort of the Zhang Fu patterns or your 5-element theory. So I guess depending on which one you attended would probably dictate how you're constructing your APC, what your base is. So Kiko, Richard, yeah, Dr. Tan, balance method, Davo style. Good on you, Jackie. Davo. Master Lee's 10 points. I like all these different theories that are coming out. It's really fascinating to learn how different acupuncturists construct their treatments and what their Miriam Lees, thank you, why they're coming to their conclusions. You know, I know a lot of the classics and the pre-modern texts were all very interesting, but often it wasn't a case of explaining why. It was more just going, you do these needles for this condition. Off you go. There was no why. And I think that there's a lot of value in the why, of course. I listened to the energy field, past and what is presenting in the pulse. Lovely. Yeah, there's been some lovely, again, pulse experts, I guess, that are coming out a lot more now, and what you can get in terms of diagnosis off the pulse in order to get your points. Commander empirical points, hologram, physiotherapy, sheet dry needling. Yeah, lots of different ways of looking at something. Yeah, thank you for sharing. Appreciate that. So lots of the questions that are coming up over this next little bit are in my books. We'll talk about them a little bit later on. So the average number of needles used in the APCs are 8 to 16. Now, even though the structure of the point combination is coming from me, the points that are in the actual combination might be me, or it might be from lots of different places, and we'll get into that in a minute. But typically you'll see them as being structured around that 8 to 16 needle mark, sometimes up to 17, maybe a few more, some rarely ever below 8. I think that personally, from my perspective, unless you're really good at really understanding the connections of points, maybe less than 8 needles perhaps is not quite enough. Although if you do less than 8 needles and you're getting good results, well, that's fantastic. And I guess it's a shame that we don't get the opportunity to do this workshop live, because that'd be where during the break we could sit down and I'd be chatting to you and learning about, you know, when you do less than 8 needles, you know, I want to know about your outcomes and, you know, why you've come to that conclusion. In the same way that if you use more than 16, you know, why you're doing that and your explanation or justification for that number of needles. I think sometimes if you do too many more than maybe 20 to 30 even, that It's hard to know. I feel like perhaps you're trying to do too much or you're spreading yourself too thin. But again, there are lots of acupuncturists out there that do way more than 16 and get wonderful results. So it's not about me saying 8 to 16 needles is the only correct way and that anything less or over that is wrong. It's just showing you how the point combinations, how the structure is placed. And if you do less, then take some needles out. If you're doing more, then add some extra points in. Do I do bilateral or unilateral needling? For those that attend my workshops, you know that I do bilateral needling almost always. The acupuncture point combination tables all through the weekend have bilateral needling, or it's the assumption that it's bilateral unless it's specifically stated. So you will see on occasion left side only, right side only, but otherwise they will be bilateral needling. For me, I feel like if there's two of a point, that it makes sense to needle them both. It's like a double shot. If you're doing large intestine 4 because you've got a bit of a headache, well, if you did both of them, is it doubly beneficial? And that's where I feel like it is. But if you do unilateral needling again and you're getting good results, well, again, I'm not questioning who's right or who's wrong. It's completely fine. It's in the end, my workshops are always encouraging you to make sure you're doing the best that you can and that we don't start to get a little bit lazy and, we've got this list of needles that we do all the time and it doesn't matter what's wrong with the patient. We do the same types of needles, same types of points. I want us to always be on point and always doing the best that we can with our patients. And I guess when you attend workshops such as this, you're giving up your weekend. I think that that's inherently what your desire is with your patients as well, regardless of the CPD point aspect. Just having a quick drink. So in Australia, you've got to do 20 CPD points, so continuing professional development. I know different countries have different abbreviations, maybe it's CPE. I can't remember exactly what it is in America. But in Australia, you've got to do 20 points a year. You can't buy a book and then claim that as certain points. You used to be able to a decade ago, but not anymore. So you would come to a workshop such as this one, and you would get a certain number of points. And obviously the quiz sort of shows the association that you completed the course. So those 20 points, some acupuncturists in Australia scramble to get them each year. I'm probably several hundred points a year. I'm always wanting to learn, always wanting to improve, and that's just me. I think that'll always be me for the rest of my life. Sorry, my croaky throat. So what about yourselves? How many needles do you use on average in your treatments? And do you do bilateral or unilateral needling? You throw that up in the chat for me, please. CEUs. Oh yes, continuing education units. Thank you. Been reading Pulse since 1973. Fantastic. My goodness. Good one, Colette. Always put the needle for the most important point first. I believe this draws the chi to that point, and the other points support it. 6 to 14 needles. Yep. Chi points might be added. I will turn the patient, so 2 separate treatments. In one, 4 to 10 unilateral. Cool, okay. 20-ish bilateral, unilateral, around 10 needles. I do bilateral, about 15 needles. 10 to 14, 9. 8 to 10. 10 to 18. I often end up with an odd number personally myself, which I'll explain more in a little bit later, why it's an odd number. 16 to 20. Yeah, it depends on what you're treating, of course. Maybe the person's got multiple musculoskeletal complaints. They've got neck problems, low back problems. They want everything treated. Do you treat everything? Do you target just the neck or just the low back? Sometimes you're going to get up into the 20 plus needles. Sometimes if it's someone that's maybe a little bit frail and deficient and you want to just tiptoe in, you might use less than 10. Often unilateral, Kiko style, 15 ventral, 15 dorsal. I don't know a lot about the Kiko Matsumoto style. I do have an 8 Extraordinary Vessel book from her and Stephen Birch, but I have heard that she's absolutely incredible. Always even numbers, less as possible. Yep. Yeah. Thank you very much for sharing. Appreciate that. Why do you state the number of needles? So this is a question for me. So a lot of people ask me, why do you state the number of needles used in your APC rather than the number of points used? So when I say 15 needles used rather than 15 points used, it's specifically so that you know the total number of needles inserted in the body. Sometimes you might not call them needles, you might call them pins. But whatever you call them, it's the total number of needles that you used on the patient, not necessarily the number of points. And I do that because if I say points, then you might say, well, what do you mean, bilateral or unilateral? So if I use large intestine 4, does that count as 1 point or 2 points if I needle it bilaterally? So it's actually, large intestine 4 is 1 acupuncture point, but 2 needles, really, when you think about it. So that's why I put the total number of needles into the APCs. How do I design the APCs? I limit the stacking of needles all in the one area. There are some very famous point combinations from history and they've proven to be effective. So I don't question that. I still am intrigued by it and look to maybe alter it from my own frame of thinking in the same way that I hope you're doing that too, where you see point combinations listed that I've given you, and then you alter it based on your thinking. You can do it as is, but you don't have to. You're not forced to. And for me, one of the most important things is not putting the needles all in the one spot. I think if you'd put them all, say, elbows down or knees down, you can get great results, but maybe you're limiting your successes because there's going to be some stagnation somewhere that might impact the benefits you're getting from needles that are all in the one spot. So I sensibly scatter the needles around the body. And you'll see in the tables that I'll show you shortly, there are needles perhaps on the head, face or neck, trunk, front or back, arms or legs. And that's how the table looks, blank. But again, for those that have attended my workshops before, you recognize this. And that's what you'll get in terms of the structure throughout the weekend. So you'll get the points listed for where they're located. There's usually a reason for why they're chosen, unless it's a bit like revision, in which case there isn't necessarily the reason there, or I'm putting multiple, multiple things on the one table. So when we get into colliding numbers later today, you will actually have the ruling number and the personal year number side by side. So you won't have the acupuncture point and the reason, you'll have the two side by side. So what does sensibly scatter mean? It's like if you can imagine the channel system as being highways and roads, and cars travel on these roads. The cars and the fuel or petrol or gas in the cars and the cars themselves are your vital substances, the chi, blood, body fluid, and jing. Obviously, chi is the primary substance we target when we needle acupuncture points. So imagine that when you needle an acupuncture point, you're getting into your car and you're starting it up. As the chi is activated, it starts moving, as does your car when you start driving it. And so that's that picture I get, that I put the needle, I picture this is my needle, and here's my large intestine 4. I put the needle in, and it activates the chi, and it starts the chi moving. If you think about it, where you are driving to is dictated by what acupuncture point you use. One of you mentioned in the chats before, you've chosen a point to perform an action, and then the other points are used to support that acupuncture needle. That's one strategy in terms of how you might go about doing acupuncture. So having a little bit of fun with this slide. Perhaps you're driving to work, large intestine 4, maybe to buy groceries from the shopping centre, it's needling stomach 36, or to visit a friend for a coffee and a chat, spleen 6. My point is that when you put a needle in, it's performing a function. Obviously with spleen 6, it's about lots of tonification of your vital substances. It's moving energy back to the organs to make more, to distribute it everywhere. That's one of its special qualities. But, you know, when you get in the car, where are you driving to? You know, we go to get our groceries, we drive to work, we visit friends. But regardless, the minute we start driving, there's a crucial ingredient needed. You can't just get in the car and start driving. You need petrol or gas. And then how far you get is dependent on how much fuel you have in your car. I was taking my 14-year-old to the hospital to have an ultrasound the other day. She's been having some problems in her tummy. And I got in the car. I was running a little bit late, which is very unusual for me because I'm usually very good at getting to places early. But, you know, we were a little bit rushed to get out the door. We've got a new puppy. We've got a very sick other dog. And so it's been quite overwhelming in the Hartman household lately, along with my mum staying with us who has pneumonia. So an overwhelming house. I get in the car and I turn the car on and there's 5 kilometres left of petrol. And I'm like, well, I swore and then apologised to my 14-year-old because we're running late and I've got to stop and fill up the car with petrol. And so anyway, I got cranky and then I just explained to my 14-year-old, I'm sorry, this is my venting process. It's got nothing to do with you. It's got nothing to do with anything. It's just me getting the energy out rather than bottling it in, getting it out, blurting it out, and then reframing my language. So by the time I got to the end of the street, I'd already reframed my language. I'm saying it out loud to my daughter. I'm saying, okay, we're now going to have a wonderful day. We'll be fine. We'll get to work. We'll get to the hospital on time. Everything will be great. And of course it was. If I'd stayed within that bitchy carry-on attitude, or I'd bottled it in and let it brew and brew, this is not helping me. It's not helping the situation. And so what you need, getting back to this thing, is if I'd kept driving with 5 kilometres because I'm panicking and I need to get where I'm going, I'd have run out of fuel. And that's what we don't want with an acupuncture point combination. We don't want the acupuncture needles to run out of energy. We're trying to actually create an outcome with our treatment. And it's very important that we kind of keep that zing going. You know, the needle zings, and then we get to the next acupuncture needle and it zings, and it's constantly moving energy. And that's why sensible cities have regular petrol or gas stations for commuters to fill up their tanks. Otherwise, there'd be cars on the sides of roads everywhere that'd run out of fuel. Sensible scattering of needles in the body is like sensible scattering of petrol stations along the roads and highways. The roads and highways, of course, are all your channels. Having other needles nearby ensures that you are never going to run out of fuel before you get to your next destination. Having that constant flow of energy being charged through the body, it's creating, for me, in my mind, a much more holistic and better outcome with my acupuncture treatments. And I think a lot of the time we don't even really think about that as practitioners. We've got the points we use, we know they're reliable, we put the needles in, we have faith, intention that everything will work out. And of course it will in that case for the majority of patients. But I like to have this concept or understanding of what it is, the dynamics of what's happening. If I can't, I guess, physically see chi in those channels, what can I understand the processes of it a different way? If needles are scattered too far away from one another or stacked in one area, there's a distinct risk that your treatment won't be as effective. I remember years ago, I watched an episode in Seinfeld where Kramer and I can't remember who else was in the car, they're running out of fuel and they decided to see how far they could get rather than stop and get petrol. And it was incredibly funny. You don't want to run out of fuel and then have to push the car to the nearest petrol station. Who wants that? And that's what we don't want with an APC. We don't want our needles to be like Kramer in that Seinfeld episode. So that's why I have sensible scattering of needles. The APCs regularly have front and back acupuncture points. Does that mean I flip my patient mid-treatment? Question, who does flip your patient midway through a treatment? If you put that in the chat. That's a valid point, Colette. We don't know how many needles we're going to do until our patient's actually on the table, do we? I don't know. I have between 8 to 16, and that's why, because I don't know based on my patient. I don't flip, not often, once in a while. Yep. Rarely. I do with some, I don't. I do. It's standard for Kiko, okay? Thank you. I guess I'm probably going to have to learn a little bit more about Kiko, aren't I? I have been interested in learning more about that. It's just been about, I guess, time. Yeah, maybe you do some needling and some cupping. Good point. Sometimes, not usually. Yeah. Look, I don't flip them very often. If you do, and you've got your reasons for why, and you're getting good results, that's just in the end, then good on you. Like that's the point combinations that I have listed here will have points on the front and the back. So if you do flip, then you've got those options. For me, I used to flip. We often taught that, and I was taught that by a number of my clinical supervisors, that you can flip. I started to find as a patient receiving acupuncture that I didn't necessarily like being flipped myself. So now I tend to choose face up or face down after we've gone through the case history, the chat, and we work out what it is that they specifically want treated or what I think would be best, and they agree. And then there's a decision, face up or face down. Or I go, okay, on this rare occasion, I do want to flip. For me, because I didn't like being flipped, I felt like I'm giving myself permission to come and have acupuncture to get better from an imbalance. And I get my needles in and I'm laying there, I'm relaxing and relaxing and relaxing, and I'm, oh, this is great. Life is good. And I'm just in that, that bit where you're just kind of on the edge of having a little nap and you're in that real Zen moment, and then the practitioner comes back in, right, okay, we'll take those needles out, flip you over, and you boom, oh, right, okay, needles out, flip over, needles go back in, and then you try to go back into that Zen moment again, and it's hard to get back there. I went to an acupuncturist once that was recommended to me, very, very what's the word I'm looking for? Not famous. She was considered to be like the guru of the suburb that I had moved to. And so I went, well, I've got to go get some acupuncture from this lady. She's been doing it for 30 years, I've got to go and get some treatment from her and see what's what. I went to her clinic. She had 4 clinic rooms, all side by side, as is often standard in clinics. She had thin walls that didn't go to the roof, and so there was a gap between the roof and the top of the wall, not dissimilar to perhaps having curtains, but it was a little bit more private than that. And I walked in to my room and I saw a little egg timer on the edge of the door, and I was like, oh, what's that? That's interesting. Went in, she'd put the needles in, she left the room, she put the egg timer on and went into another room. She was basically working through the rooms, and 10, 15, 20 minutes, whatever it was, the egg timer would go off and she'd back into my room again and flip me. And in the end, I kind of felt like, what am I, a bloody cooked egg or something? It felt really weird and I didn't like it. I understood why she did it, because she's trying to navigate 4 rooms at once and not get lost. And she's also decided that I need this much time for my treatment. So there were reasons for why she did it, but I felt like I was a cooked item. She was cooking me up for dinner in a kitchen. It was really weird. She did flip me. That wasn't the main reason I stopped going to see her. It was more the egg timer, to be honest, which is probably not fair on her, but anyway. So I don't personally like being flipped as a patient. Now, is it all about the patient? What's the best outcome for them? Maybe it is to flip them to get that best possible outcome, in which case I do. But otherwise, I don't personally like doing it. So I edit my point combination to suit. So I look at the point combination in my brain, and I have the front and back ones in my head, and we're deciding at that point where they're getting up on the table, face up or face down, which one's best. And then the point combination is structured off that. Am I going to do the same next treatment? Maybe, maybe not. They're coming in the next time, they could be a little bit different. So if I don't flip the patient during the treatment, why do I have the points on both sides of the body? I don't know what you want. The point combinations are not structured so that they're a perfect version of how I treat. They're structured because of textbooks I've read, workshops I've attended, conferences I've been to, Chinese medicine peers. Sometimes they're my design, but it's a collective of all those things. So that's how the point combination is structured, which means there's going to be face up, face down because of that. And also because I don't know personally whether you like to do front and back. So I like to be able to offer both options for you as participants. If I had all face up and you love having patients face down, then it might be quite aggravating to see all the point combinations from me and you're like, well, where are all the back points? And vice versa. Do I have a common diagnostic method? I do. I use the Zhang Fu pattern differentiation as my standard, but I also am observing my patients' verbal and non-verbals as well, body language, all that. So from the point that they're arriving through to all of the needles going in the body. So my point combination structure is not completely set until the very last needle is inserted. And everything leads up to that point of that last needle going in, where I might watch their gait as they're walking towards me, the chat, and all those things that are dictating how the needles are structured, which we'll talk about in just a minute. I do consider 5 elements or musculoskeletal based stuff where I might not even do a Zhang Fu pattern differentiation. I know we might say qi and blood stagnation in the urinary bladder channel of the neck region or whatever. But, so I don't get too hung up on that if I'm treating musculoskeletal. I do consider 6 divisions or 4 levels. They're not commonly used by me, more the concept of the relationships. So 6 divisions having yin and yin partners and yang yang partners. If I'm treating the stomach, then the large intestine is usually treated as well through that yang ming 6 division connection. I think the 8 extraordinary vessels have a lot of value. I absolutely adore them. I love researching them and talking about them. I actually have a 2-day workshop on that, which will be your Tuesday, Wednesday, your Tuesday, Wednesday in America. I'm doing 2 days on the 8 extras and 5 spirits. If you're not doing anything, please come along. Do I use intuition, your gut, your heart? When someone says, do you use your gut? I go, no, I use my heart. My last name's Hartman. I'm a fire archetype. It's my heart. My heart is my gut. And you know what? In the end, I do both. I do have intuition, but I do consider that 30 years of clinical experience. Is that intuition or is that experience? I still think I have intuition, but I also think my experience plays a part. Do I use intention? Absolutely. I expect results. I have a genuine belief in the medicine and in my ability. And if the patient wants to listen, I explain what I'm doing. And then what do? They start visualizing it in their mind. And so what's that doing? Their body is healing itself through that process. I don't heal them. I do a very good job of choosing the best possible acupuncture points I can to assist them to heal themselves, but technically they heal themselves. When constructing my point combinations, how do the points come to me? So that comes from immediately like greeting them. I don't mush my patients on top of one another where one patient's leaving, another one's arriving. I've got time and I leave gaps because sometimes I don't know how long I'm going to need to treat someone. And so there's that little gap also partly to recharge. I've worked in clinics where I've had 3 patients basically coming in every hour, every 20 minutes, another patient, 3 rooms at once, boom, boom, boom. 2 patients every hour, every 30 minutes, 2 rooms, patients coming in every hour on top of one another. I don't like doing that anymore. I want to just be able to dedicate all my attention on one patient, recharge, next one comes in. That's sort of my structure. So I work from home and I often hear them pull up out the front. So I go out and greet them at the driveway or at the front door, and everything starts from that greeting. So not in a creepy way, I'm observing them as they arrive. You know, hey, Sharon, how you going? Hey, Shazza, how you going today? And just, watching their response, watching the way that they're walking towards me, that starts the process of me getting ideas in my mind. Their main complaint gives me ideas of what I do. The accompanying signs and symptoms give me ideas. Ultimately, the Zhang Fu diagnosis puts everything together, and then I look to see if that togetherness creates a connection, and then ensuring that I have sensible scattering of needles. So that's the process. So work from home, usually hear my patients arriving, talk about all of that, ready. And I also think that's a personal touch. I'm coming out, I'm showing that care. The patient's main complaint automatically gives me a list of points I could use. These are not points I'll definitely use, but they're a good place to start. And I picture them as individual jigsaw puzzle pieces in my mind. So how might that look? My 19-year-old showed me how to get jigsaw puzzle pieces up on PowerPoint. I didn't know how to do it. So let's say they've got a headache. So points that pop into my head when they say they've got a headache: large intestine 4, bladder 60, gallbladder 20, small intestine 3. These are the sorts of points. Sometimes lung 7 if they've got a headache with neck tension, bladder 62. There's lots of other ones that can pop into my head based on the headaches. And then if they tell me where the headache is, that can give me more information again. But that's the idea behind it, is that for me, they mention they've got headaches and little individual jigsaw puzzle pieces pop up into my head. That's just the way it's always been for me. Doesn't mean I'm going to use those points, but they're the ones that appear. Or if they've got insomnia, yin tang, heart 7, spleen 6, the one at the back of the neck, an mien, an, peaceful, mien, sleep. So the Chinese name tells you what it's doing, which is helping you have a peaceful sleep. So they're the types of points that pop into my head if someone says they've got insomnia. What about accompanying signs and symptoms? So these give me more points I could use, which helps me refine my point list. Some points that were up here buzzing around leave, some stay, possibly get stronger. So they might have a headache above one eye, along with stress, frustration, and neck and shoulder tension. If that's the case, then some points will be more important. You can see large intestine 4, I think, probably could still stay. Combining it with liver 3, opening the 4 gates. We briefly discussed that in more detail tomorrow if you're unfamiliar with that, although I think that you probably, most of you would be familiar with that combination. I think gallbladder 20 can stay. It's very good for headache for any sense organ. Sorry, throat being silly. Gallbladder 37 is a very good distal point for eye problems, headaches associated with eyes as well. Guangming, bright light, or bright white, bright eyes. It's a good point on the leg to help with headaches and eye disorders. Then the Zhang Fu diagnosis finalizes the points I have floating around in my head. So using that same list of signs and symptoms, I might say, oh, they've got liver qi stagnation. And so I've added in pericardium 6. I've changed gallbladder 37 to gallbladder 34. That's where a point that I had in mind left, because I think gallbladder 34 can still get the outcomes that gallbladder 37 did, but with better connections to other points. So I'm looking for these point connections. So I want them to be communicating with one another to enhance the treatment. We talked about that in more detail a month ago. And they look like sort of this type of thing in my head, but obviously the structure of it's different when you see it on the table. So for me, I'm looking for those connections. Now, there's more connections you can see with gallbladder 20 and gallbladder 34. There's not the jigsaw's not connected there, but there's definitely a connection still between those two. So there's lots of different intricate relationships going on there that are a little bit different to that image, but I wanted to show you how that works in my mind of layers and layers and layers. And as people keep adding the information, the jigsaw starts to take shape in my mind. Whereas for you, you'll see it like this. Obviously, there's a few more points listed there beyond what was in that image on the previous slide. This has 17 needles all up. If you use less or more, then look to make adjustments. But again, building off that experience, or not that experience, building off that image from the previous slide, it's rounding out that connection. I used this example a month ago. You got front moo, back shoes, yuan source. All those points are really good to treat the organ that is where there is the disease. In this case, we talked about liver qi stagnation. So we want to treat the liver. We also want to move the qi, gallbladder 34, pericardium 6, and liver 3 are probably 3 of the better points to move qi in the body. Opening the 4 gates is good to move qi, helps a person calm down, feel less stressed, but motivate and give them energy. We've got kidney spirit gate. We touch on that a little bit more tomorrow, but basically there are a collective of points through here that work on different organs, their associated elements, their associated spirits, and their associated emotions. Do 20 is really good, I feel, to calm the Shen, which is important in liver qi stagnation because they often have a lot of stress. So for me, the points are sensibly scattered around the body. There's that sort of in that range of 8 to 16 needles. I'm not flipping them. So the reality is I'm probably going to have less points there, aren't I? So if I do face up, then I won't have bladder 18. I can get to gallbladder 20 face up. They tilt the head to the side. I needle transverse, come back. Everything okay? Yep. Is that still okay? Yep. Put that needle in, come back. Everything okay? Yes. I don't do that for patients that wiggle a lot, because even though they say they're fine and they won't move their head, they still do. But if they're happy enough and they just lay there and they're not stressed about the needles being in like that, then I will consider doing that with them face up, or I would leave it out, or I would actually go, it's better that they're face down, in which case some points on the front would miss out. Range of different points on different channels. There's a range of points on the same channels, but in different body areas. So this is looking at those connections. Again, this was a slide that was in a month ago, so I really don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but obviously not every one of you were there a month ago, so got to bear that in mind. So it just shows you the little intricacies of the connections that you often probably don't even really think about when you're structuring your own treatments. Got points on the same channel. Gallbladder has a neck point and a point on the legs. Liver's got a point on the feet with a point on the chest. We've got 4 gates connecting. It connects also with Do20, front move, back shu yuan source. We've got yin and yang partners, yin-yin partners, good chi movers. We've got that double wood connection on the chest. Is there anything else? Talked about this already. 8 to 16 needles, bilateral needling, don't flip. And usually the needles stay in about 20 to 30 minutes. I feel like anything more than 30 might be beneficial, but is it counteracted by them, their desire to get up and get back into the day again? They're getting edgy and jittery, they just want to leave. Have you reached a point where they're starting to compromise the treatment because of their desire to get moving again? If I feel like they still need more time, well, then that's what you have to weigh up. Anything less than 20, maybe I haven't given them quite enough time. It's really dependent on the patient. My favorite channel is the Ren, which is why I often have an odd number of needles, because it's 1 needle per point. So if I've put in Ren 14 and I've done bilateral needling for everything else, then that's going to give me an odd number, just as one example. My 10 favorite points are here. That doesn't mean that they're the only 10 I use, of course. I think on average, most acupuncturists probably only really use maybe 50 different needles in their clinic on a week-to-week basis, maybe less than that. These are my 10 favorite, but I've got well in excess of 50 needles I could consider using. These are just the ones that will often be the ones that I think will be most effective based on experience, but it doesn't mean that I will use them. So I don't think there's too many surprises there. Heart 7, large intestine 4, spleen 6, liver 3, kidney 3, stomach 36, gallbladder 20, Ren 17, Do 20, and Yin Tang. So I think it's interesting to kind of consider what your favorite points are and to maybe do your own list of 10. It's a curiosity thing in some ways as to whether we do have favorite points. I'd say we have to. Do 20 is in orange because it's my favorite point out of all of the acupuncture points on the body, but some patients don't like it, so I don't do it. How do I know that they don't like it? We try it. And if they go, oh, I really don't like that sensation, let's take it out. It might not be the best point for them. Even if I thought it was at the time, we try it, no, don't like it, sure, take it out. A lot of those points are below elbows and below knees. They are a very famous collection of points, all those points below the elbows and knees, I get it. but that's probably my list of top 10. And the point combinations that we'll have throughout this workshop will be often using front move points. I consider it to be the best point on the front of the trunk to treat the organ, whether it's yin or yang, I don't care. Back shoe points, best points on the back of the trunk to treat the organ. Don't care if it's yin or yang again. Yuan source, best points on the channel to treat the organ. So best point on the front, best point on the back, best point on the channel to treat the organs. Orrery points will be included. Sometimes they are the element on the element. So they're the wood point on the wood channel, which would be liver 1 or gallbladder 41, or earth point on earth channels, spleen 3, stomach 36, fire on fire, metal on metal, water on water. They balance out the element, so they technically do excesses, deficiencies, stagnations, whatever. Lower Herc points, there's 6 of them. They are for yang organs, and they're all from the knee down. So even the 3 yang channels have a point on the legs that are their lower Herc points. So they're really good, those 6 for the yang organs. So if they're related to any point combination over the next 2 days, they will be mentioned, possibly. Kidney spirit gate are in nearly every point combination. If you don't believe in them or you don't really know much about them, we'll talk about them more tomorrow. Briefly, granted, but at least it's either a review for you or a fresh approach. Not all of you will necessarily agree with the kidney spirit gate points, in which case, take them out. Maybe that's still enough. You use what's left there, or you change them to something else. The outer bladder channel spirit points are talked about briefly tomorrow as well. They're the outer bladder points for the 5 spirits. So again, do they treat the spirit, or do they just have the spirit in their pinion name? This is a debate that's ongoing with acupuncturists around the world. I think that they do treat the spirit they're associated with, but not everyone does. So again, if they're listed and you don't use them, then I'm not forcing you to do something you don't want to do. And then there's lots of other miscellaneous points that are used as well throughout the point combinations. Okay, so we're going to have a break in just a moment. I'm just going to look at the chat quickly, see what you've got here. Yeah, well, the other issue with flipping is that you might be a bit time poor as well. Now, that's if you flip, then you've worked out how to do that in terms of time. But that can limit the amount of time each acupuncture point has a needle in it. Yeah, so don't flip. Disturbs their treatment. Well, you can flip them if you want to. I'm telling you how I do it. I ask the patient, although they don't necessarily know, to be fair. But if they've had acupuncture before, then they have a sense of what they like and don't like as well. I never like being flipped either. I don't think I've ever flipped. Yep. I use the 4 gates quite a bit, yeah. Great favorite points. I had gallbladder 39. Gallbladder 39 is another really good point. True. I don't even know if it would be in my top 20, perhaps not even in my top 50, but I do love it for its value in terms of, well, actually a range of things. Dystally for lots of sense organs. It's good for deltoid shoulder problems and various other bits and pieces, questions and answers. Okay, good day, David. Loved your classes. My question is, since my birthday is 22nd of May, not sure if you say Kitty, if that's how you pronounce your name. Your birthday needs the date, the year as well. So if your birthday is the 22nd of May, you need to put your year you're born. So I was born in 1973, the 10th of the 10th, 1973. So you have to add up all those numbers. So the 10, the 1973, add every single one of those numbers up. That gives you your ruling number. We'll talk about that shortly again, review that shortly again. So your personal year only ever clashes with your ruling number year every 9 years. So there must be something not done quite right there in your calculations. I use electrical stimulation sometimes, especially for musculoskeletal. I think there's a lot of value there. There is a point combination that I talk about in my acupuncture point combination book called Chain and Lock. And that's where you use one channel and you charge up a whole series of acupuncture points on the one channel. And you can electro a range of those needles as well to make it even more powerful. But I think there's a lot of value in electro for sports injuries and musculoskeletal. I don't use it as much in my clinic these days because I'm doing a lot more mental and emotional health and a lot less on musculoskeletal, but there's a lot of value for it, yeah. Let me see what this is saying. Yeah, no, I got out of my PowerPoint because I've finished that section. And before we get into part 2, but thank you, Donna, we'll have a quick break just to get ourselves, you want to grab a coffee or a cup of tea or go to the bathroom, or as we might say in Australian slang, the dunny. It sounds so gross, doesn't it? I actually find it quite amusing. So we'll have 10 minutes, please. So it's must be 10:25 for you in Los Angeles. So 10:35 back. We'll get back into it again. So thank you very much. We'll see you in 10 minutes.